He resembled a man who'd lost sight of how. Sterling Rhodes stood at his kitchen window and gazed out over the vacant corral where his cattle had once grazed. Dust devils curled in the stagnant air, disturbing only memories. The erstwhile thriving ranch was quiet now, its fences broken, its barns empty. Sterling's calloused hands rested on a cold cup of coffee, a ritual he'd never missed a morning in 3 years. Not since Margaret's death. The house was so still now it seemed as if it would disappear if he breathed. No laughter from the porch. No hum from the garden. No padding on the creaky wood floors. Only Sterling and the phantoms. He reminded himself he'd become accustomed to the silence. Preferred it, in fact. The closest neighbor was 15 miles east, and he liked that. People came with questions. And questions awakened memories he had no desire to see. His days were a routine of need. Feed the other horses. Check the well. Repair whatever the wind ripped away in the night. Can beans. Sleep in the chair beside the fire, never in the bed. That bed had become too wide, too chilly. Days went by not by the sound of a clock, but by the changing light on Margaret's portrait over the mantel. But that morning something disrupted the routine. A dust cloud on the distant horizon. Sterling carefully placed his cup on the table. Guests were uncommon and seldom welcome. The sort of people who traveled so far tended to bring ledgers, lawsuits, or threats. His face hardened. He tracked the form emerging. Not one wagon, but several. A small procession moving steadily onto his property. He instinctively reached for the rifle over the door. They were travelers, by the look of the weathered canvas draped over each wagon. The tired oxen with heads down. Whoever they were, they'd traveled far. Sterling stepped out onto the porch. His boots hit the boards like thunder in the stillness. Wind brought the creak of wheels, the distant murmur of low voices. The head wagon approached his gate, and then Sterling noticed something that made him stop. The driver was not a man. A woman rode tall in the seat, wearing a tattered blue dress, dark hair tucked under a bonnet. Behind her, several more women, children as well. No man among them. The wagon stopped just at his fence. She looked at him calmly, lifted a hand in greeting, but hadn't spoken yet. Sterling didn't stir from the porch. 3 years of solitary, and he'd almost forgotten how conversations started. But there was something about this moment. It wasn't normal. It was the first ripple before the storm. The woman descended with practiced ease. Her dress carried the dust of travel, but her demeanor was steady, composed. She approached his gate with hands clasped before her and spoke in a firm tone. "Good morning. My name is Clarabelle. We're going west to California. We were wondering if perhaps you could spare a little water for our animals." Sterling's gaze took in the group. 5 wagons altogether, all pulled by women. Children hiding under the canvas, smudged faces and wide eyes. The oxen seemed spent, just managing to stand upright. These people were working them hard. He examined Clarabelle's face, resolute, but etched with exhaustion. "Water ain't free," he said. His voice clawed the air, unfashioned and gravelous. "You have money?" Clarabelle didn't blink. "We have money." She paused, then looked back at the others. "We were also thinking you could let us camp on your property for the night. Just this once. We'll leave at dawn." Sterling's hands clenched the railing. To let them remain would disrupt everything. His isolation, his quiet, the tenuous balance he'd held on to. But then he saw the children once more, and how Clarabelle stood, attempting to remain so. Something moved, something long suppressed. Margaret's words whispered in the recesses of his mind. "Why here?" he said. "The main road's 20 miles south. There's lots of water there." Clarabelle's expression turned somber. "We had a run-in with some men 3 days ago. They trailed us for a bit, but we lost them in the hills. We've been keeping off the main roads since." Her eyes never drifted. "There are 5 of us and children, Mr. Rhodes. We're not looking for charity. We'll pay for water, for grass, for the inconvenience. We just want one night when no one comes for us." Sterling glanced again, more intently now. A blonde young woman held a baby, her hollowed-out face etched from lack of sleep. An older woman stood up straight on the wagon behind, eyes alert and guarded. These weren't helpless folk, but they were unprotected, vulnerable, and that strangled something in Sterling's chest. Men? He asked. How many? 4 or 5, Clarabelle answered. They were the type who take what they want. Her tone did not waver, but Sterling caught the slight trembling of her hands. We escaped in the middle of a storm, but they may still be following us. Sterling did not say anything for a very long time. The man he was before Margaret died would have invited them with open arms. Set a table. Started a fire. That man had gone down with her, though. What was left was a ghost hanging on to a routine. And yet he heard her in his mind. Help those who knock. That is what we built this house for. You can water your animals at the well, he said at last. 50 cents for the water. $2 to camp the night. Clarabelle exhaled, relief softening her shoulders. Thank you, Mr. Rhodes. You won't regret this kindness. But as the wagons came rolling in his gate, after 3 years of silence, Sterling wasn't so certain. Allowing these strangers in seemed to open a door he'd bolted shut. And once it was opened, who could guess what might come after? The yard erupted with noise. Children's giggles. Women's chatter. The snort of oxen and the groan of wagons settling. Sterling remained rooted on his porch, drenched by the sheer life pouring into his world. Clarabelle moved silently in command, moving the wagons into a circle around the well. The women worked with the ease of a seasoned crew. Smooth. Effective. One blonde woman, Mercy as Clarabelle referred to her, handed her baby to another before hobbling towards a hobbling ox. Sterling observed her check the leg of the animal with skill and concern. These women weren't merely holding out, they were professionals. Clarabelle came back to the porch and extended a small leather pouch. The payment we promised. Sterling accepted the coins and saw her hands. Calloused, worn. The hands of a person who had worked every mile. You've done this before, he grumbled. Not of my own choice, Clarabelle said. We're all from a place called Millfield, somewhere around 200 miles east. Her tone faded, and something crossed her face. A shadow darker than the dust. Drought stole the crops 3 years straight. Clarabelle spoke softly, her gaze wandering to Mercy as she scooped up her son to stroke one of the oxen. Most people pulled up stakes and left. The few who remained, well, we didn't have much of a choice. Her sentence dissipated into the wind, incomplete but dense with meaning. Sterling hesitated, then spoke the words he immediately regretted. What happened to your men? Clarabelle's face went as hard as she did. Calera took mine, and Tom Whitmore. Mercy's husband died in a mine cave-in. Suddy's been solo the longest. Her man didn't return from the war. She pointed to the wagons. What you see, that's all that's left of families. Sterling felt something twist inside his chest. The hollow in Clarabelle's eyes. He recognized it too well. It mirrored his own reflection every morning for the last 3 years. Were you headed in California? He asked, trying to soften the silence. San Francisco, Clarabelle said, her voice lifting slightly with hope. My sister's there. Says there's work, laundry, cooking, sewing. Honest work, if a woman's willing to do it. Sterling was struck by the soft assurance in her words, and pained at the hope that lay beneath. Before he could answer, a burst of laughter exploded. Mercy's little boy had found Chester, the elderly barn cat that Sterling had believed long-forgotten happiness. The mangy Tom habitually ran from strangers but was now purring loudly as the boy scratched behind his ears. Chester doesn't normally warm up to people, Sterling explained in real surprise. The cat had belonged to Margaret, aloof now as if mourning her death. Children and animals, Clarabelle answered with a gentle smile. They know kindness in one another. As the sun set low, Sterling made his way back to his porch. The women were constructing camp, starting a fire, attending to their children, cooking supper with hushed familiarity. Laughter and quiet conversation filled the evening air. For the first time in years, the rhythms of life substituted the choking silence of his home. The ranch no longer felt like a tomb, but Clarabelle's eyes were not. As shadow crept across the prairie, she watched the horizon warily. Sterling saw her immobility, how her eyes locked west, on a thin, unnatural streak of dust. Something was amiss. Sterling tracked her gaze. The trails of dust weren't blowing with the wind. They were cutting against it in horizontal lines. Mannered. Intentional. "How many men did you tell me were chasing you?" he asked, low and even. "4, possibly 5, said Clarabelle, drawing her skirts tightly around her legs. "We believed we'd lost them in the canyons." But Sterling had lived with the land long enough to know its language. These were not lost riders asking the way. These were wolves closing. "Put your people into the wagons," he said, leaving the porch. "Shut the children up." Clarabelle didn't hesitate. She sped from wagon to wagon, her voice soft but authoritative. Mercy clasped her son to her tightly. Suddy banked the fire until it left only a glow. In seconds, the yard was empty into stillness. Flickering embers and uneasy oxen were all that was left. Sterling ducked in, picked up his rifle, double-checked the cylinder on his pistol. 3 years of solitude had taught him caution and honed his marksmanship. He waited in crouch, his rifle against the weathered wood of the water trough. From there, he could see the road easily. The horsemen looked like specters from the darkness. 5 men, sitting on fat horses. They had silhouettes that moved with purpose, not desperation. These were not drifters. They were men who took. His leader rode on ahead, a tall, broad man with a full beard reflecting moonlight. His attire was too good for actual trail use. As they stopped at the fence, Sterling smelled sweat and saddle leather. The fellow leaned forward in his saddle and looked around the yard. "Evenin', friend," the man hollered, too courteous, too suave. "Name's Fletcher. We're Searchin for some people. Pass through here maybe. 5 wagons. Women. Children. You see anyone like that?" Sterling didn't shift. His finger hovered next to the trigger, but his target wasn't drawn. "Not yet." "Could have," he replied. "Depending on why you're lookin'." Fletcher grinned, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Just trying to bring back something that don't belong to them. A few personal things, some cash. You know how it goes. Time of need." He gestured to his men, who moved out a bit to either side. "Won't take but a minute to have a look." "What did they steal?" Sterling asked, though he already knew this wasn't about property. Fletcher's tone stayed breezy, but his hand hovered near his gun. "Oh, this and that. Point is, we're just trying to do the right thing." Sterling's grip tightened. Men like this didn't carry justice, they carried excuses. Predators who saw unprotected women as easy pickings. "Ain't seen anyone matching that," Sterling lied calmly. "You boys should ride on. Gettin' late." Fletcher's smile disappeared. "Odd thing," he spoke slowly. "We followed wagon wheels all the way to your fence. Fresh tracks. Our boy Boone here, he's knowledgeable about sign." The one named Boone spat on the ground. 5 wagons. 3 hours back. Oxen too. Sterling felt the old discipline take hold, like putting on a soldier's uniform. Some battles can't be avoided, only confronted. He lifted the rifle, steady, intentional. Those prints could belong to anyone. Traffic comes through this land. Fletcher shifted, growing impatient. "No need to do that, friend. We're just discussing." Sterling noticed the glances that passed between them. Subtle movements, riders spreading out, hands caressing gun handles. "Conversations ended," Sterling said in a cold tone. "You ride on, while you still have the chance." Boone's horse shifted uneasily. "Fletcher, perhaps we—" "Shut up, Boone," Fletcher snapped, his eyes never leaving Sterling. Then, with venom, "Here's the thing. We've been tracking those women for 3 days. They've got something that belongs to our employer, and we're not leaving without it." He waited. Could make this simple. Hand 'em over. No one gets hurt. Sterling's tone didn't falter. "What's your employer's name?" Fletcher smirked. "That's between him and the ladies. They stole. We're here to make it right. Like I said, we're practically lawmen." Sterling nearly laughed. A joke. Lawmen traditionally ride wearing a badge. Nearest sheriff's office is 60 miles to the east. Out of the corner of his eye, he noticed movement. Clarabelle, her face glimpsed briefly through the canvas slit of a wagon. Tight but not scared. Behind her, he heard the quiet shuffle of the others preparing to move. "Look, old man," Fletcher growled, his temper wearing thin. "5 of us. 1 of you. Do the math." "Math was never my best subject," Sterling grumbled, his index finger wrapping around the trigger. "But I always aced target practice." Fletcher snatched for his gun, but too slowly. Sterling fired. The rifle crack cut the darkness. Fletcher's hat was ripped from his head as the bullet passed, close enough to divide his hair. Horses screamed and pranced, casting confusion among the group. The men flailed, trying to get control. And the battle had yet to start. "Next one won't miss," Sterling cautioned, speaking in a low, even tone as he cycled his rifle's bolt. The 5 men struggled with their panicked horses, disorder unraveling quickly. But then, another noise above the sound of chaos, horseback riders. More coming in hard from the east. Sterling's blood ran cold. Fletcher picked up the sound too and smiled. "Hear that, friend? That's the rest of our boys. Told you this could be easy." But Fletcher's smugness was short-lived. Sterling's eyes knitted into a frown as he counted the rhythm of the approaching riders. At least 4, possibly 6. The odds had just turned against him in the very worst possible way. But when he glanced toward the wagons, where 5 women and children huddled in frightened stillness, something clicked into position within him. Sterling Rhodes was finished running from life. Finshed hiding behind the ruins of his sorrow. Tonight he would battle, for them, for himself, and for the sake of his wife. The clatter of hooves echoed through the ranch yard as Fletcher's reinforcements rode in. Spreading out to shape a broad arc, Sterling was now surrounded. 10 to 1, walled off between his porch and the water trough. Fletcher called out one final time, loud and full of assurance. "Last chance, old man. Give up the women, and we'll permit you to live." Sterling's brain worked overtime. The house provided cover, but to get there would expose him. The barn was nearer, but if he could make it there, he'd be leaving the wagons undefended. Then he recalled his training. Sometimes the best defense is offense. "Want them?" he bellowed. "Come and get them." His rifle cracked again, this time hitting Fletcher's horse. The animal screamed, bucked, and dumped its rider. Gunfire burst back, muzzle flashes lancing the blackness like lightning. Sterling leaped behind the water trough as bullets whined over their heads and splinters flew. And then something totally unexpected occurred. The canvas flap of the wagon nearest sprang open, and Clarabelle emerged, shotgun gripped firmly. She shot twice without hesitation, knocking a rider from his horse. "Ladies don't steal," she yelled, reloading with careful accuracy. "But we stand up for ourselves just fine." More flaps opened up. Mercy came out with a rifle. Sadie brandished an old cavalry gun. Even the older women came out ready and armed. These weren't helpless victims. They were survivors, frontier women who knew how to look out for themselves. Fletcher's men staggered back at the unexpected resistance. What was meant to be a quick robbery had become a shootout. Some of the bandits dived for cover behind outbuildings. "Mercy, take the north side," Clarabelle snapped with natural authority. "Sadie, keep an eye on the barn. Don't let them get around our flanks." Sterling took the opportunity to run toward a more advantageous position by the porch. A bullet hissed by his ear, close enough to make his skin tingle. He returned fire, taking out another attacker. From the darkness, one of the men yelled, "This ain't what we signed up for. Fletcher, you said they were just terrified women. Shut up and keep firing." Fletcher snapped, but fear was creeping into his voice. A child wept in one of the carts, the high-pitched wail slicing through the bedlam. Mercy sang a lullaby, low and shaking, attempting to comfort her infant. That vulnerable song was more piercing than any bullet, stirring every soul to the core of what was being threatened. Sterling experienced something awaken within him, something he'd assumed was dead years prior. For 3 long years, he'd only existed. But tonight, keeping these people safe, he was back. Reason washed through him in waves of fire. A window to the rear of him burst. Sterling saw the gunman and fired, hitting the man in the shoulder. The momentum swung in their favor. But Fletcher wasn't finished. "Burn them out," he cried. "Burn the wagons." A rider fastened a torch to his stirrup. Sterling's heart beat in his chest. If they burned those wagons, children would perish. He charged from where he stood, rifle firing. 2 bullets were heard. The torchbearer fell, the flame dying in the earth. But it had cost him dear. Fletcher had circled behind him and now stood out of range, gun leveled. There was one shot, ripping into Sterling's left shoulder and sending him to the earth. His rifle went out of his hands. "Got you now, old man?" Fletcher spat, coming forward with murder in his eyes. Sterling turned over onto his back, crawling for his sidearm with one good hand. Blood soaked his shirt. Fletcher shot for his heart. The shotgun bellowed. Clarabelle had fired from the rear. Fletcher fell speechless. The other bandits bolted. "Let's get out of here," one yelled. "This ain't worth dying for." In a flash, they were gone into the night, hoofbeats receding into silence. Clarabelle rushed to Sterling's side. "How bad is it?" she asked, already working to stanch the bleeding. "Seen worse?" Sterling muttered, though pain pulsed through him. "You ladies all right?" he called out weakly. "We're fine, thanks to you," Mercy called back. "The kids are scared but safe." Clarabelle ripped strips from her petticoat to bandage his wound. Sterling observed her in the light of the moon. Strength, compassion, and something else, something he hadn't known in years. Hope. "Why'd you actually leave that settlement?" he asked quietly. She hesitated. "Because Fletcher's master owned most of the land surrounding Millfield. When our husbands died, he figured we were easy pickings. Tried to make us do disgusting things. When we wouldn't, he sent Fletcher after us. We took what little money we had and fled." Sterling understood at last. These weren't fugitives. They were refugees, men who treated them like cattle. "You're safe here," he told them. Clarabelle looked at him. "We can't tarry, Mr. Rhodes. We've caused you enough trouble already." "Perhaps trouble's what this town needed," he said, shocking himself. "Been too still here for too long." While his wounds were attended to by the women and frightened children comforted, Sterling surveyed his ranch yard. For the first time in years it was alive, full of purpose, a family, of hope. Morning would bring new decisions. But tonight had already changed everything. Sterling Rhodes was no longer a man waiting to die. He was a man ready to live again. Now, click on the video on your screen to hear a story even more powerful than this one. One with an ending you'll never forget.